Hello, welcome to Staring Down the Storm, Autism Advocacy in America. I'm your host, Tabitha Ziegler. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. We have the honor and the privilege of speaking to our Air Force veteran, Melinda Grisby. So everybody say hi to Melinda.
Hi, how's everybody doing?
So I think this is part of the problem that I do not like about what is happening right now with our politics, with our country, with people that are in positions of authority right now. I don't feel like anybody is really asking the veterans what they think, what war is like to truly paint a picture for the American public of what type of shit show that we're walking into. So I'm going to give you the floor. You are the expert. I feel, like I said, it's an honor and a privilege to have you back on again so that you can speak to the populace and actually give them the reality of what this looks like.
So, I served 10 years in the Air Force, did 2 tours to Iraq. My first tour was in 2003 to 2004. I was out there for about 5 months, and then my second tour was in 2010, where I was out there for about 6 months and a couple of months of training before that. I was in 2 different locations. My first tour, I was there as an ER medic in Balad Air Base. It was the most mortared base in all of Iraq at the time. We actually nicknamed it Mortaritaville because of how many mortars would come into the base at any given time, mostly during the day, which sucked for me because I worked night shift and getting woken up by constant blasts and booms really does a number on your mental health when you get home. You kind of your brain protects you in a way where you kind of get used to the explosions and things like that. But then when you get home and you now know you're in a safe space, thunder, in the middle of the night will wake you up. And there were times where um, I would find myself falling off of my bed and going underneath my bed taking cover. Um, when I so that's a big thing is explosions, mortars going off, things like that, where you get a lot of people who struggle with loud booms, thunder, things like that. New Year's Eve, 4th of July, those are never fun for most vets.
Sure.
Because it does get to be overwhelming at times, and it does trigger kind of what you were going through when in that war zone. Um, the other part of it for me as a medic, working in the ER, we happened to be there during Operation Fury, which was an operation that was to take over. Um, I can't remember the name of the town at this point, but anyway, it was to pull the stronghold and remove the insurgency in that area. That led to a lot of casualties. We were in a mass casualty mode. I remember just all of a sudden waking up. It was like 2 in the afternoon and hearing helicopter after helicopter after helicopter going over. And I was like, why is there so many helicopters? And I step out of, we call them chews. They're basically very paper thin metal trailers that they have us live in instead of tents. And so I walked out of it and I'm seeing like a line of helicopters waiting to land at our helipad at the hospital, which at my time when we were there, the hospital in Balad was all tents. Think of MASH. That's exactly what it was. It was set up into all tents. We had ORs, we had the ER, we had surgical wards, all of these every different areas that was just a string of tanks linked together. And so seeing all of these helicopters, you I immediately grabbed all my gear, started knocking on doors. At that time, you started hearing the sirens going off, alerting the medical team to everybody. It was all hands on deck. And we're getting there. And we probably in 3 days, we saw way over 300 patients in 3 days, um, which was a lot. It was very overwhelming. Triage was, those that you know for sure will make it is who you say first. There was plenty of people that we knew that they were barely alive and had to literally put them into the chapel room that we used to store those that were dying or getting ready to die. Um, you see a lot of horrific injuries, war, especially with today's devices and weapons and things like that. It's been very much it's not what you see on TV. You see limbs that have been completely torn off of people, or I mean, I've witnessed people like their both legs like filleted open like fish from an explosion. Um, you see uh don't want to get too graphic, but I think it's important,
No,
you
I think you
know.
should get graphic because right now we have people that, they're instigating war and they're using games, like we're talking about games to try and get young men and women hyped up like it's Call of Duty and it's not like that.
Mhm. It's not. I mean, there was times, I mean, I remember one night it was in the middle of the night, we were pulling somebody off the chopper and I'm, squeezing air into their lungs and it was dark, so by the time we, get from the helipad into the ER where we have light, the doc says, "Just stop." And I go, "Why?" And he goes, because literally and then I look down and as
Mm,
I'm pushing the air in, I'm seeing brain matter coming out the top of this
mm,
person's head.
mm,
They had a horrific injury, caused by an explosion.
mhm,
You saw a lot of amputees. What people see now are the cleaned up versions of amputation.
mhm,
I've literally seen hands that look like they were put through meat grinders. So it's there's these are images and smells.
mhm,
Burnt skin. If you've ever smelled burnt hair, that
mhm.
sticks with you.
Yeah,
Burnt skin will forever stay with you. It's something that never goes away.
yeah,
Um, and seeing people with burns over 90% of their body. Things like that that and those are just the soldiers.
sure.
We're not even talking the civilian casualties of war
Mhm,
that happen,
mhm,
right? When you see babies, little kids coming in with these horrific injuries, and that does something to you when you're dealing with IED blasts on a child who's now lost both of their limbs and they can't see and they've got, shrapnel all over their body and, it's not something that where TV and movies portray this as this heroic thing and these soldiers just shooting at each other. And yeah,
mhm,
you might see a
mhm,
soldier go down because a bullet hits them or whatnot, or maybe every now and then you might see something blow up, but you're not really seeing the close up effects of what that looks like. You might see the on a movie screen like a body fly, but you're not seeing what that actually looks like up close and personal.
mhm,
So it's been romanticized and, over the years, and it does something to you mentally. So those that of us that have seen it up close and personal, whether you're in direct combat or indirect combat like myself, so there's the direct and the indirect. I was in indirect combat. I was, still in the front lines dealing with the trauma that was coming in, but I wasn't actually out there in the combat zone fighting the fight. And so those people, then you got to think about what they're having to deal with, what they're
mhm,
seeing, because they're seeing the initial blasts or effects of somebody being injured, but at the same time, they're also in a mode of saving their own lives. So they've been taught to kill. They've been taught to defend themselves, right? But their whole objective being out there is literally for people to kill each other. And
mhm,
that's what it comes down to. And I've heard from several, I've never myself had to take a life, but I've heard from several of my friends that have had to, and they're like, it's something that you never get rid of. You try to figure out ways to block out how you've taken lives, or the only way to deal with it is to not think of them as human. And that's
Mhm.
the purpose, right? That's the whole purpose of war, is to dehumanize the people that you claim are the bad guys, the terrorists, the evildoers, and so forth and so on. You dehumanize them to the point where it makes it easy for people to take their lives, and it removes that humanity out of it. And as a troop, as a soldier, when you have to remove your humanity in order to take life because you're removing the humanity of others, that's some very big mental strain. Um, so, all of that, you get a lot of people that come home with mental health issues, either whether it be PTSD,
Mhm.
whether it be major depressive disorder, whether it be high anxiety. Some people even end up with OCD.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of things that people come home with that it changes you. Really changes you. Sleeping patterns. Uh, get altered for the rest of your life in some cases. Um, Explosions, most of us have like permanent tinnitus in our ears, and it
Mhm.
sounds crazy, but you know, I I can't name a single vet that doesn't like sleep with their TV on or sleep with some kind of noise on because
Mhm.
it drowns out that very low humming, ringing in the ear that when it's dead quiet
Mhm.
it's annoying and it's like it starts to becoming like you just want to like oh and you like even cover your own ears, you're like oh just stop. And so for the last 20 years I've slept with the TV on every night of my life, you
Mhm.
know um so it's the little things that sometimes you don't recognize, for even like I was talking about earlier, 4th of July, New Year's, things like that. I have to prepare myself and,
Mhm.
you know, usually have the TV on or the music full blast or get headphones or, things like that that allows me to uh kind of drown out a lot of the explosions. When I was in Texas, though, their fireworks out there, I swear they do all the most illegal fireworks ever, in the neighborhoods,
Mhm.
and, like, my neighbors would literally do these huge explosions where you could feel the vibrations in the house, and
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
know? And so, even if I drown out the noise, you're still feeling the vibrations of the booms that energy still comes to you and it triggers you. So, I think there's a lot of people that like, I hear it all the time every year, like, well, you can't expect people not to have fun and not do fireworks and things like that because you guys can't handle it. But it's not even just those that anybody who's been through any kind of explosion for any matter. um Even people who have lived in neighborhoods where there's a lot of gunfire,
Mhm.
that will trigger people quite often as well. So I think it's time that we have a collective conversation about these things that do trigger people, but at the same time, stop romanticizing what war looks like and what war is, and that you're going to come back some unsung hero and that everybody's going to praise and give you parades for, you
Mhm.
know. Anybody that has ever, if you've listened to any veteran who's come home to the parades, they'll tell you they feel weird. Most veterans will tell you we all feel weird saying hearing thank you for your service. Like
Mm.
it's the weirdest thing. I really like I don't say much to anybody, and most of us don't because we don't know how to really say that, and we know some people are very much appreciative, but in other ways, it's like more of a like a virtue signaling thing
Mm.
too. But it's like, thank me for what though? Like especially for those that have had to take lives, like, "You're thanking me for killing people." Like, it's
Mhm.
a very weird feeling to hear, "Thank you for your service," and most of the times I'm like, "Oh, okay, thank you," or, "You're welcome." I don't even know how to
Mhm.
respond.
Mhm.
20 years later, I still don't know how to respond to "Thank you for your service." Um, One thing that I've had a couple of friends that will say, and I've started doing this too, is instead of saying, "Thank you for your service," saying thank you for your sacrifice or we appreciate your sacrifice.
Mhm.
um that's a little bit more enduring and kind of does it make you feel like you're thanking us for going out there and committing atrocities and colonialism towards other groups of people, even though that's what we're doing, and we're trying to
Mhm.
come home and rectify those things. And you don't get you get the training on how to be a killer, you get the training on how to be a quote unquote warrior, but you never get the training on how to go back to being regular civilian and having to deal with those feelings and those things. And the VA's um solution to that is been throwing medications at people. um there's not enough uh there's not enough therapy or therapists out there that can do the therapy with patients, and even then that traditional talk therapy doesn't always work. um there have been several patients that I've seen that end up going inpatient, um, that try so many different other types of therapy. I've even seen people doing electroshock therapy, all kinds of different things just to help them deal and cope with the duality of serving in the military and quote unquote protecting our lands, but at the same time going out there and doing harm to other people in their lands. So it's this weird dynamic that struggles. It's the struggle that so many veterans have, like trying to trying to deal with both aspects of that, and finding a center in that, which is where a lot of also the mental health problems come into play too, because there is no deconstructing from the military. You basically got to figure it out on your own. There's no deprogramming from that. They program you one way in somewhat of a cult mentality, and then they don't deprogram you when you get back. And then if you're in for years and years, I did 10 years. You're programmed that way for 10 years, and then getting out of the military, that changes everything. And, I've been accused of you come off difficult, or you come off hardcore, or you come off very serious. And, we've been trained that, there's no fluffing. You don't
Mhm.
fluff things. You
Mhm.
you get straight to the point, you're direct. This is why I'm so blunt as it is. You just get to the point, because when you have to beat around the bush, that's lives at stake. And
Right.
so you get all of those things. So all of that kind of plays into just reintegrating back into society. Is similar to inmates, prison, inmates, those that have been in jail for so long, coming back into society and integrating back into society after living a very indoctrinated, structured life is a very hard transition. And most people, a lot of people can't handle that. And you don't know anything else. Your whole identity has become that. And so to break away from that is very difficult. But it's not the the hero walks that people think, and the praise that you're going to get, and the medals that go around. I mean, my medals are somewhere in a box.
Mhm.
You know, they don't mean nothing in that way. Um, I know plenty of people that have, silver stars, or, these very high valor medals that they gather dust.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean what the rest of society thinks it means. The rest of the society sees it as an honor, and like, oh, they've got the ultimate award because they did the ultimate thing.
Mhm.
And the person receiving it though is not the same.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
it's kind of like a overall breakdown of, and that's not even just the best descriptions I can give. It's hard to really put into words what it's really like. And I often see, like, I call them the Call of Duty warriors, and
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
quote unquote revolutionaries that just want to go and jump into civil wars and fight
Mhm.
and overtake and overthrow and do all these
Yep.
things without recognizing the consequences to that, and who that affects and how that affects people. Because it's not just the veterans that are affected, it's also our families.
Mhm.
My son had to grow up a little bit differently because of my PTSD.
Mhm.
Um, my family always worries about me. Even to this day, they'll still worry about me. They notice me getting a little depressed. They'll be
Mhm.
like, "Are you okay? Do you need to go see therapy? All the things that because of mental breakdowns that I've had in the past. So it doesn't war isn't just impactful on the people that you're going after,
Mhm.
and it's not just impactful on the soldiers, but it's impactful on the families and then the rest of society afterwards. My attitude towards you, is something that could be triggered, and I can
Mhm.
come at you in a way, and we're just here on a podcast or whatnot,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
But it can impact you. My what I've experienced can directly impact you just based off maybe something that's triggering. So it does impact everybody. It's not just the soldiers. And I think once more people recognize that and realize that, you start looking at war as something not to cheer on and cheer for and not to advocate for or push for, even in the worst of times, even with something like 9/11.
Mhm.
The response isn't more violence, and it just continues the violence and the cycle of violence. Um, and that's why I've said in the past where, um, defense and violence are 2 different things. Defense is defending our people and only utilizing violence in a defense mode and the necessary amount of violence to stop the threat. Whereas attacking whereas being the aggressor, that is not defense, that is just straight violence and
Mhm.
going in and, like, literally reshaping people's lives.
Mhm. Well, it's really valuable what you're sharing, and this is why I want to have these conversations. I think also there's something to our age group, right? Because we've seen so much war, and whether we were civilians or whether we were active duty, we remember things like Abu Ghraib, and we're, like, seeing things that are happening now, and I think, like, a lot of, like, Generation X and like, the millennials, it's making us very, very uneasy
Mhm,
because, whether we went to war or not, we knew someone that did, or we knew someone in our community that did, and more often than not, those people came back different and
mhm,
needing help. Um, I have an aunt that was a nurse at the VA, and I had several family members that were in the military for different conflicts. I didn't go, but I saw the toll that it took on the people around me. Even my grandfather, he didn't go to Korea because he had a very rare blood type, but
mhm,
the rest of his unit went. And if I'm correct in this, I don't think any of them came back. And even though he didn't go, he lived with that his entire life, like, sort of lived with that guilt, and every time that he talked about these guys, he'd get tears in his eyes. But I think he was constantly telling their stories, right, to just keep their memory alive. He was trying to respect them in that way. And, I I get very, very concerned when there are so many people that either are not veterans or don't come from military families or really don't have that sort of connection that are so quick to be
mhm,
like, yeah, go war. And another thing on top of that is you have several domestic violence survivors, right? Like
mhm,
maybe these people come back and they're not right. And I don't mean to say not right in the way that they're faulty, but what they experienced made them different when they came back, and there are wide variety of things that can happen. I'm a domestic violence survivor. It was not from a military person, but I'm just saying I probably also have PTSD, but in a different way, and I
mhm.
think sometimes when you experience things like that, it opens up your mind in a different way. So, this is why I wanted to have these conversations because I'm like, "This is serious stuff." Like, you guys, you're not taking this seriously. You're not taking the ramifications of this seriously. And now we're diminishing the programs at the VA, for example, that would deal with these problems that these people may have when they come back. And I mean, let's face it, the VA probably needed a hell of a lot more funding than it even had to deal with everything that people really needed. And then they cut that. So, I just wanted to raise awareness to some of those issues and say, right, like you're so eager to send our sons and daughters off to war, but you're not eager to provide them what they need when they come back.
Yeah. And then we're often tokenized.
Mhm.
and used as political fodder.
Mhm.
Um, Quite often, like even going back to like, the Colin Kaepernick and the
Yep.
NFL and the kneeling on the knees. That's so disrespectful to our veterans. Well,
Mhm.
what's disrespectful is that you got 33,000 homeless veterans. That's what's
Yep.
disrespectful.
Yeah.
You know, I can tell you that the vast majority of veterans, across the board were like, yeah, we don't care.
Mhm.
You had your
Mhm.
few, you still had you still have your veterans that are still very much super, indoctrinated or whatnot. And there's not much you can do about that.
Sure.
There's some of my friends that or I would say former friends now where they
Mhm.
are just so like, I'm like, bro, you need help,
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
this is not normal. This is not okay that you're
Yeah.
just like seeking to
Mhm.
destroy people. Like that's not normal. And so, um, but for a good majority of us, we're just like, or even those that were in the military but didn't actually go into a combat zone.
Mhm.
So sometimes they'll have that like more indoctrinated mind frame and thinking, kind of
Mhm.
like what I call the Call of Duty warriors, civilian
Mhm.
Call of Duty
Mhm.
warriors, same thing. They've not actually been into those combat zones to understand what we're talking about. So even when we come home, even amongst other veterans, we can tell. We can tell who's actually been deployed and seen some shit and those that haven't, and
Mhm.
you can clock it pretty quickly and be like, nah, mm-mm.
Mhm.
I've never seen a veteran who's been in combat who has ever glorified it when they got home. Never.
Mhm.
I've
Mhm.
never come across one that has done that. If they are glorifying it, they are either lying about their service and what they did, or they were one of those that maybe stalled or choked up or whatnot
Mhm.
in the middle of a battle and
Mhm.
had to get saved by their own unit or whatnot,
Mhm.
and so compensating for that. um
I think it's good to bring up some stats right now just to kind of like clarify for people, not to interrupt you, but
no,
before
you're
I
good.
forget. So I pulled this up and I verified with you just to make sure that I wasn't off track on this. About 1% of the US population, between 1.3 million and 1.4 million people, are currently active duty personnel serving in the military. Approximately 6% of the American adults are military veterans. And then we have approximately 5.5 million veterans in the US who have a service connected disability. So for those people that you're talking about right now, right? Like that's actually a very small percentage of the US population.
Mhm.
And I feel like for those that can and want to right now, like those people out there that are pro war, I would highly suggest you go and find a combat veteran to have this conversation with if
Mhm.
they are willing to have it, right? Like, don't force them. Some people don't want to talk about that stuff, and that's okay, right? But for the ones that are willing to talk about it, you go straight to the horse with everything, right? So why wouldn't you go straight to the horse with this?
Yeah. And um and that is, I mean, it's a very small. It's less than 1%,
Mhm.
of the population on active duty. That's a small amount. So you get people who are like, yeah, we want the war. Well, then why aren't you at those, recruiters' offices?
Mhm.
Why
Mhm.
aren't you going to get the training? Why aren't you out there? You can give me every excuse in the book, but I could tell you the military will find waivers,
Mhm. Mhm.
especially if they're in desperate need of troops.
Well,
They
they're talking about reinstituting the draft right now. So that's why I
yeah,
felt those numbers are important to mention, right? And,
yeah.
while we're talking about that, I will also just mention I am probably going to beat my drum a bit about this because, I am running for office and that's part of the reason, right? Like, I
Mhm.
feel like we need good people to talk about things like this, people that will tell the truth. And there aren't a lot of those people sitting in these positions right now. And I think if there were, they would have shut this shit down. And that's the right thing to do. Like,
Yeah.
the American public, we don't want this in general. So, how do we have people sitting in positions right now that supposedly we elected that are
Mhm.
saying, yeah, like go war or even, and like I said, I'm gonna bounce this off you because this is just an opinion. But even just with the domestic violence stuff, right? The
Mhm.
things that I've seen. either that happened to myself or happened to other people that I've, like, helped care for these people after the fact. I would almost bet that most vets would probably say, "Even if we entered, that doesn't mean that we can't shut it down." I bet the Iranians right now would be like, "Yeah, leave. Awesome." Like, there's no reason just because we committed, right, that we have to finish everybody. Like, that's part of being an adult, right, is to admit when you're wrong or admit when you have new information and be like, it's a bad way to put it, but, like, we could be like, "Hey, my bad. Like, now we have new information. That was wrong of us, and we've done some horrible things, and now we need to commit money to helping you guys rebuild." Like, I think, in my opinion, from a civilian standpoint, from a veteran standpoint, on both sides, right? Like, I don't think a lot of people would be like, "Yeah, let's not do that."
I think it's real hard because, like, even when I was in Iraq, most of us, once we got there, we realized we weren't fighting for the things that they said we were fighting for.
Right.
Um, and I think you'll see that with most of today's troops. The part of the problem is how do they would have to organize within the military to pull a collective front of disobeying orders as a full front, is a
Mhm.
whole unit,
Mhm.
or units, or brigades, whatever. Every branch is different with what they call
Right.
things, but it would have to be an organized and a full front that the entire unit is willing to step up and say no. um Otherwise, they basically is the defectors,
Yep.
and those defectors get highly punished, seen as traitors, um, get thrown into military prisons,
Yep.
which are sometimes way worse than your civilian prisons,
Mhm.
because then they're subjected to hard labor on top of that,
Mhm.
and they are basically living in boot camp every day of their life.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
so in order for that to be the case, if in order for that to happen, it would have to be a collective organization through the military and them standing up and saying, no, we are not going to follow these unlawful orders. Um
And just to clarify, I meant more from, say, like, the senator's perspective, right? Like,
Mhm.
if the American public is putting pressure on you, like, please, like, do the right thing. At any point now, you could be like, "You know what? I was wrong." And I think that is a hard pill for the American public to swallow, is like, right, like, public opinion is against you on this, and you're supposed to be representing us. And certainly, the position that these soldiers are in, they know all of these things, right? They know what would happen to them if they defected, and that burden should not be on them. But we certainly, I feel like, should be putting the burden on our legislators, because this particular war, and I think most wars, have been very unpopular.
I think part of that is that when it comes to senators, congressmen, and all in or congresspeople and
Mhm,
all
mhm.
sorts, um, you got to get rid of the money.
Well, yeah.
That's what it comes down to.
Yep.
They themselves, again, it's like, it's out of sight, out of mind. Oh, we got these troops, we'll send these troops off to war, but it's the same thing. They're not having the conversations with us, and
Mhm.
they won't have the conversations with us,
Right.
right?
Right.
They're not going to, um I mean, I remember when Roe v. Wade was overturned, I
Mhm,
called,
mhm.
I was living in Texas, I called Ted Cruz's office several times and like,
Right.
why does Ted Cruz hate his female veterans? They're like, what
Mhm,
do you mean? He supports them. Well, you're literally stripping of us of our rights, and
mhm,
we are supposed to uphold the Constitution. So why are you removing rights from the very people who are supposed to protect those rights?
mhm.
I mean, they. Do you think I'd ever get an audience with Ted Cruz? No.
Sure.
And not unless I walk up to his office and, do all the things.
Well, and they'd put
But
you in
like,
handcuffs if you were brave enough to do that, right?
exactly. So, they're getting paid. They're getting the
Mhm.
money to continue these wars. They're
Right.
benefiting from it, right?
Right.
They get not only money from it, but they get power from it. They're
Right.
benefiting from conquering. And,
Mhm. Mhm.
they can't even apologize to indigenous people
Right.
over, for still being a colonial government
Right.
in
Right.
indigenous lands. So at the end of the day, there I think it would be ideal for, yeah, them to
Right.
collectively say we were wrong and dedicate money to rebuilding what they destroyed. Will they ever do it? No.
But you know
And
what
that's
I
where the
think though?
collective overhaul comes in, is getting rid of that old power, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
collectively overhauling all of that, and changing up who's in those positions.
Right.
Um and that's the only really way to do that, with either dismantling it completely or getting a whole new kind of grassroots movement that doesn't
Mhm.
associate at all with those powers to
Yep.
get the collective of the people behind them to, overthrow that in that way through those types of elections. But even then, now you're also contesting and dealing with, you know, the rigging of elections
Yeah.
through gerrymandering and voter suppression and all the things that they do to keep themselves in power. It's an uphill battle for sure. Is it
Mhm.
impossible? No, but it's definitely, you have to look at every single layer and how they keep and obtain their power.
Well, and this is why, not the only reason why we're having this conversation, right? But I very much am one of those that feel like courage is contagious. And the
Mhm.
more of us that are like speaking out and having these conversations, it does spark that curiosity and courage, because I think sometimes people just need to hear it, right? Like they need to hear from a vet and be like, "Oh, well, I actually didn't think that," or "I
Mhm.
wasn't aware of that." And if we don't start to really force these conversations, I mean, I'm not saying every vet can have it, right? I get that, and I certainly don't want to put any pressure on any vets, especially that have PTSD. Don't force people to have these types of conversations. If they are willing to, and they wanna advocate for themselves, for fellow service members, great. This is not me saying walk up to someone that was a combat veteran and force this conversation. This is just me saying, if you come across someone who's willing to do it, sit down, listen to them for hours, and then do the next level of advocacy and pass that story if they're willing to let you talk about it, right? Just sit down and start to have conversations with people and say, you know what? I had a conversation with someone, and this is what I now know to be true, or this is what I now know war actually looks like.
Mhm. Yeah. And and there are plenty that will talk about it.
Yep.
There are those that don't. Um but those that are willing to talk about it, you'll find them
Mhm.
being very loud about it. I'm one of them. I'll be
Mhm.
very loud about my experiences and what I've talked and what I've seen. And sometimes I'll drift off. You'll see me kind of staring into space while I'm
Mhm.
talking about it.
Mhm. Mhm.
But at the end of the day, though, it is things that need to be heard, right? Like, um I understand why people join. The reasons why I joined were for the very same reasons most 18 to 24-year-olds with
Mhm.
undeveloped brains join.
Sure.
It's it's the it's the promise of socialism. And then the ironic part of it is then they send us into war to fight socialists.
Mm.
You know? So
Well,
they
and you
they
also came from a military family, correct?
Uh, I had, like, my mom's brother served.
Mhm.
I had other cousins
You
and
knew
uncles that
people.
served. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Both my brothers served after, I was the oldest, and they served after me. My
Yep.
ex-husband, married somebody who was in the military. So, we've all kind of, it's grown into a bigger military family than what it was. But,
Mhm. Mhm.
um, yeah, you those that are willing to talk about it will talk about it, and their voices that need to be heard. Um, but it is difficult. It is a difficult transition into the civilian side. Even for those that didn't even go into a combat zone, it
Mhm.
still can be a very difficult transition because you're still enduring the same type of, brainwashing and
Mhm.
assimilation into military culture itself. It's its own culture. But again, then you have the whole, the promise of socialism. Basically,
Mhm.
they don't
Mhm.
call it that. They're not
Right.
gonna tell you that the largest social program that's ran in this country is the military. You
Mhm.
know, your free healthcare, your free dental care, your housing allowance, your food allowance. You know, they substitute these things when your
Mhm.
base
Mhm.
pay isn't enough.
Right.
Combat pay, hazard duty pay, tax-free pay, you know. You this is how they got a lot of us to volunteer to deploy when, you know,
Mhm.
we were outside of our deployment cycles. Oh, well, it's tax free. So 6 months tax free, you know, that could put and you're not like, especially for someone who's like living in an apartment, put all your stuff in storage, pay $100 a month in storage, you shut off all your other bills, you
Mhm.
have nothing to pay, maybe a car payment, if that,
Mhm.
and you come back with like 15, $20,000 in your account at 23 years old, all tax free. You know, that's for at 20, you're like, "Oh, that's a lot of money." At 43, I'm like, "That's gonna pay off a bill," or
Mhm.
whatnot, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
But, I mean, that's what they do is they're like, "We're gonna give you tax-free money while you're deployed." You know, everything that you make is yours, on top of the combat pay and on top of
Yeah.
this and on top of that. And then, you know, you're still getting your housing allowance while you're deployed. You're still getting your food allowance while you're deployed. You're still
Mhm.
getting, you know, all of these things while you're still deployed. So that's extra money that's accumulated. And, you know, you're still getting your health care and your dental care needs and all of those things. I mean, we still had clinics out there.
Mhm.
It wasn't just a hospital. We had, you know, regular clinics that, you know, people would go to because they were sick or they
Mhm.
needed their blood pressure meds or whatever, things like that. So, you know, these are things that, you know, you're still provided for. You're still provided a socialism type of environment, even in a war zone, which
Mhm.
is insane because, like I said, the irony is that they got us out here fighting people who are trying to bring socialism to their own countries, you
Mhm.
know? So that's where it comes down to. It's the most ironic thing ever, that that's what they use to lure in and to get people to serve and to get people to do their dirty work, their bidding for them, while at the same time using us to fight against the very thing that they use to bring us in. It's it's this weird cycle of, and that's how they control and keep their power in that sense. So, um, but yeah, at the end of the day, talk to those who are willing to talk and listen to the stories. And if you're willing to hear the gruesome graphic details, then I think people should listen to those things, because it is important to hear what it actually is versus what they show on a TV screen. Um, for me personally, um, you know, most people can walk out of a movie theater and then that's it. You know,
Mhm.
the images that they saw on the screen stay there. They
Yeah.
don't go home with you, right? For me, um, those images have stayed with me you know, ever since I came home.
Yeah.
And they never go away. Um, I would say there are times where I feel guilty because the faces that I would stare into, as people would die are now becoming faceless, if
Mhm.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
I can't remember the details of their faces
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I don't know if that's um me forgetting who they are. I don't know. It's not intentional. And I've always tried to remember every single face.
Mhm.
Um I don't know if it's just getting older, whatever it is, but it does still impact. It's still there's days where I'm like, "Man, I can't even remember their faces anymore." And that's
Mhm.
sad, you know? Does that mean their memory is fading? Am I the only one that can keep their memory going? Um, do they still have family? Where are their families? Some of these people didn't have families either.
Mhm.
Some did, some don't. Just every we came from various backgrounds. So, you know, those things stay with you for a lifetime. It's you don't get to walk out of the movie theater and the images disappear. The images stay
Mhm.
forever.
Yeah, I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that's probably why you and I are such strong advocates because, you know, some of the shit that I went through, I'm like, eh, personally, right?
Mhm.
When all this Epstein stuff flared up, I'm not saying that I was a child survivor, but what I am saying is when you go through a certain level of depravity, I
Mhm,
don't know how your gut reaction is not to care, right? So I think, my unofficial diagnosis of PTSD, right?
mhm,
Like, I know people that have been officially diagnosed with PTSD, and like, I react the same way. Like, all of this Epstein stuff, man, did it flare me up. Not just because I'm a mother of small children, not just because it's the right thing to do, but I just have this internal, whatever it is, moral compass or whatever that's like, no, absolutely not. And I have that same moral compass for veterans. I'm like, how can you continue to lie to these people and, come to areas like mine, right? I mean, you get a lot of enlistment from places like Indiana because you have a lot of poor people that are going in for the same reason you said, for the benefits for their families, stuff like that.
mhm,
Maybe because some of these towns are drying up and like there's lack of opportunity. Here's
mhm,
a career path. Here's a way to travel. I mean, there's just a multitude of ways. And it's parasitic, like how can you day in and day out come after these people, right? And then you're lying to them because even if you are kind of truthful and say, well, if you have some PTSD or something, we have services for that at the VA. How do you lie to these people now when you're telling people you're cutting those services at the VA? And then maybe some of these same people voted for, current figures in office, right? How do you tell those people that voted for you even? Like, cinch your
yes,
belt. I'm not willing to send my sons. I'm not willing to send my daughters, but I'm going to send your sons and daughters. I don't know. Like, there's something about that betrayal for me. And this is not me not supporting soldiers, right? Like, I actually feel like I am supporting soldiers by doing that, by having these hard conversations. And if I'm wrong, I want people to call me out. This is why I talk to vets, right? Like, I want to hear from you guys. Same with domestic violence, right? I want to
mhm,
hear from domestic violence survivors. If you're not a domestic violence survivor and you're going to try and talk to me or some other survivor about what you think, you better have your facts
mhm,
because you're not doing yourself or anyone else any justice. And I will say this too. I find that veterans, especially combat veterans and domestic violence survivors, even though we're probably fiery, we're also some people that will be very, very quiet
mhm,
and we're taking it all in. And I do feel like we're always in this hazard mode, this defense mode. It's just always just like percolating under the surface. And every time that we walk into a room, we're like checking the exits and we're assessing people out. And that sort of thing does not leave you. And
mhm,
you know, I don't know. I don't want to speak for you, right? But that's why I'm an advocate, especially now that things are so horrible. I just feel more of a duty to speak and more of a duty to have these conversations with people because I'm basically like, you know, there seem to be a whole lot of people with a whole lot of opinions
mhm,
that they don't want to do the work, right? It's really easy to say, I'm patriotic, I'm pro war, but also then not be a veteran, not know a veteran or whatever. Same with domestic violence, right? It's really easy to say to someone, well, why didn't they leave? Why'd they go back? All that sort of stuff. But you're not speaking from lived experience.
mhm.
And so, anyway, I'm rambling now, but I just get really hot about these topics. And this is why I want to have these conversations because people don't know what the hell they're talking about.
Right, and I mean, I totally agree with you. I think it does come down to listening to the people that have those lived experiences, um, and understanding where people are coming from. And even then, that it only gets you so much of a level of understanding too, right?
Mhm.
I can be very descriptive in many ways, and some people it will hit them much harder, and others it still doesn't hit them in the same way.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
so Sometimes it's this weird need that people feel like they have to go through the experience to
Mhm.
fully understand it, and that's fine. That's where I get the, "Well, you don't like to learn from other people's mistakes."
Right,
You know,
right.
those are the
You
people
gotta
that
do
gotta
it
learn it the
yourself.
hard way, you
Yeah.
know? But, I mean, and if that's what it is, then that's what it is, but
Yep.
I think a good majority of people, though, like you said, even with our generations right now, we've been in war since, I mean, for over 20 years.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I made a joke when I first got into the military with my friends. So I was 2 weeks after I graduated high school when I left, and, so they had asked me right before we graduated, they said, "Aren't you afraid of, like, going to war or anything?" And I was like, "Psh, the last war we were in was in the early '90s, and it lasted,
Right.
like, a few months,
Yeah.
I ain't
Desert Storm.
concerned." Desert Storm, it was only a
Mm.
few months, not that,
Mm, mhm.
everybody was home. My uncle went to Desert Storm, and he was a Marine, and
Yep.
he didn't even see anything, you know?
Right.
So, then but then here 3 months later, 9/11 happens, and I'm
Yeah.
like, "You're thinking it's gonna be the same thing, 3 months and you're out, right?"
Mhm.
Spent my whole career at wartime.
Mhm. Mhm.
Was not expecting to spend my entire 10 and a half years in the military in war,
Mhm.
you know? My first deployment, 2003, the next one was in 2010.
Mm.
That's a huge gap for the same war, to go to the same country, you know? Um, so that's a whole lot of consistently just training to be in war. That's a lot. It's
Mhm.
a lot. The veterans that served, and it's nothing, I have high respect for all my other war veterans from every other war that they fought, Vietnam, Korea, so forth and so on. Um, Iraq and Afghanistan were a little bit different in the fact that um, it came onto our soil, but it was created to come onto our soil. So you had way more people that were willing to go. And then once you got there, you're like, whoa, wait, this is like another Vietnam.
Mhm.
This is like another Korea. Like, we shouldn't be here, you
Mhm.
know?
Mhm.
Um, and then for as long as it's lasted, um, the amount of tours that people went on, um, outside of special forces, like in Vietnam and Korea, maybe you'd get some that would do a couple of tours.
Mhm.
But usually once you did your tour, you came home, you were done for the
Mhm.
most part.
Mhm.
Be like a 1 year long tour. Um, in this case, we would have 6-month tours, 6 months home, 6 months off.
Mhm.
Some people would go 3 or 4 years between tours. Other people, like my ex-husband, he went, he was they did 4 months on, 4 months off.
Mm.
So, gone for 4 months, home for 4 months, and even during the 4 months, they'd be doing other missions and stuff like that. So, you never really stop fighting.
Mhm.
You're always constantly in war, which is what I think is the more kind of unique thing with Afghanistan and Iraq,
Mhm.
was that even when you were at home, which is supposed to be peacetime, you
Mhm.
were constantly gearing up for war.
Mhm.
So, it never really stopped for those of us that served or were serving during Iraq and Afghanistan. Even those that didn't go to combat. I mean, you're constantly being trained for war in case you did. So, that it just didn't stop for, you know, 20 years.
Mhm.
I mean, I know people that I didn't retire, but I have friends that retired, did their full 20 years, and came in around the same time that I did, and literally spent their whole 20 years in war.
Mhm.
That's that's not normal, you know?
Mhm.
And these aren't even infantry troops where
Yeah.
that's their career path, so to speak, you
Mhm.
know? That these are logistics folks and transportation folks and, medical folks and things like that where that's not normal. So, I think this is triggering for a lot, and I think veterans, um, that from those two specific wars from Iraq and Afghanistan are being more vocal than
Yeah.
probably I've seen ever with other veterans in the
Mhm.
past. I mean, even with
'Cause they see what's
Vietnam,
coming.
yeah, we see what's coming, and we see this is not the war on terrorism is the illusion.
Yeah.
You're not gonna fight an ideology with bombs. It's
Mhm.
just not. It's just the excuse to go in and do a land grab and resource grab. That's what that's for, and to
Mhm.
commit genocide. You know,
Mhm.
that's what
Mhm.
it's for. That's what we're doing. So we see that. We see that that's exactly what's happening. This isn't gonna be where they say, "Oh, it'll be over in 2 weeks. It'll be over in 3
Yeah.
weeks." We won't be there that long. Okay, that's what you said about Iraq. That's what you said about Afghanistan. We were there for 20 fucking years.
Mhm. Mhm.
Will you expect us to believe you now? Like, no,
Yeah.
like, you know?
Well, I think the writing's on the wall too, and this is gonna sound bad, but thank God in this way, right? Because maybe it is our generation that's just super skeptical and we're like, "Hold on a second. Like,
Yeah.
this smells like shit. Like, this smells like the exact same shit that you were telling everybody back then." And, I mean, I've been sitting in places and not me having conversations with these vets, but, like, other vets having conversations, and they're saying flat out, like, "No, my son wants to join, and I told him not right now. Not right now.
Mhm,
Go to college, like, get some skills or whatever. Not like now's not the time." And it's bad when you have vets because normally it's very common for veteran families to be like, yeah, like this is a good thing. It'll make you a man. It'll give you, a career path or give you a skill set or whatever. So to have these people saying now is not the time. And a lot
mhm.
of them are Republicans, right? Like I'm not speaking from like any particular, you know, political affiliation, but I don't know. Like there was Venezuela and Greenland and, you know, what the hell are we doing? And then we bombed this girls' school. Now we're having beef with AI companies because they don't want to release the trigger switch so that we can just essentially let them go hog wild with, you know, no parental control, if you will. I'm like,
Mhm.
the insanity right now. And for the civilian population, right? We have no idea the level of weapons that they actually have, like the intelligence that they actually have, so that we're in such an AI push to just release the humanity off that trigger switch. I think for our generation is just that is triggering, right? Because we're like, holy shit. Like it's bad enough that you did this. It's bad enough you're getting us in here. It's bad enough that you want to put boots on the ground, but now you essentially want robots to do it. This is bad.
Oh, yeah, I mean, some of the AI technology that they're using, I mean, they're using drones that are like, small drones, like, the size of a soda can,
Yep.
um, that can go up they can literally go up, fly, within 10 feet
Yep.
of you
Mhm.
and take you out with a shot to the head.
Yep.
Like, you don't they'll try to frame it as, "Well, we're saving lives." No,
Mhm.
you're not. You're just creating a weapon that's easily used against civilians across the board. It's not that you're saving troops' lives
Mhm.
because you still have to have somebody who mans that,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Mhm.
I remember talking to a drone operator
Yep.
and I've talked to several pilots too,
Uh-huh.
um, where they said, like, when you're the one that presses the button, you could be 10,000 feet in the air and you're pressing the button. You could be in a remote control room, somewhere in the middle of Texas shooting people in Afghanistan.
Mhm.
You still have somebody behind the controls
Yeah.
at the end of the day.
Mhm.
Um, but to make that distance, right?
Mhm.
You have somebody in a remote room in Texas shooting somebody in Afghanistan. Okay, great. But you know what that does? That removes the humanity. Like
Yeah.
we were saying earlier, it
Mhm.
removes the
Mhm.
humanity that it makes it look like a video game.
Right.
Makes it look like a video game. You're not killing people, you're killing somebody on a screen.
Mhm.
And why do they make, for example, Call of Duty and all these other war games so realistic in that way is that mo- gamers
Mhm.
gamers are some of their number one recruits,
Right. Yeah.
and they've been desensitized,
Mhm.
to that, to playing these games, and it's nothing to just, knock out 10 people with your guns on a game
Mhm.
and people cheering and shit.
Mhm.
I mean, I've
Mhm.
seen it with my own kid.
Sure.
My son's a
Sure.
gamer, right? Like
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
seen it. You know, I had to make sure as a parent that he understood the differences in what he was playing versus that. And even at one point I was going to let him go into the military as well.
Mhm.
Um Once Trump got elected in, I was
Mhm.
like, "No,
Mm-mm.
you're not. I already see what's coming.
Yeah.
We're gonna be in World War III,
Mhm.
and I do not need you to come home with the same shit that I came home with.
Yeah.
So no." I go, "I know you're an adult." He was technically 18 at the time. I
Sure.
go, "I know you're an adult. You can make this decision, but at the end of the day, I will do everything I can to make sure you don't go into the military if I have to at this
Yeah.
point."
Sure.
So, and then like even sometimes he tells me, he's like, "Well, I don't know, mom. Wouldn't it have been better if I just went in with a job that, didn't put me on the front lines? Now what happens if I get drafted?" Cool. If you get drafted, guess what? I'm taking your ass to Canada or Mexico. That's what we're doing.
That's so
You
funny that
know?
you mentioned that because my brother's just 2 years younger than me, and I remember I got into this huge fight with my parents because, like, that's Iraq, Afghanistan time, and
Mhm.
if he's listening, like, this is not a knock to you, friend, but I'm just gonna be honest. I was like, "No, he doesn't have the stuff, like, he's gonna come back all fucked up," and no. Like, I would pay for his ticket to go to Canada because I don't want him to come back in a body bag, and
Yeah.
I think not that it is okay to send anyone, right? But I do think there are some people that right out the gate, it's like, they're not made for this shit. I don't think anybody's really made for it, right? But you know what I'm
Mm.
saying. Like, there are
Yeah.
some people that, like, for sure they should not
Mhm.
be going.
Yeah. Yeah. And you got people who just the my son is one of them. Like he's so sensitive. He's
Yep.
tough, but he's
Right.
sensitive.
Yeah.
And
He has some humanity.
you gotta love boys and their toughness.
Mhm. Mhm.
But and I've raised him very much outside that toxic masculinity realm.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
boys, kids will still be kids and they still
Sure.
think they're tough. Even
Of
girls,
course. Yeah.
I've seen them all be, "I'm so tough." Okay, cool. You're tough now,
Mhm.
but trust and believe, like, I know you, I know your personality type, I get it. There's no way you would be able to kill somebody. There's no way you would, you know, even with me, I it was hard to see
Yeah. Of
what I've
course.
seen.
Mhm.
Like, it's and you're way more sensitive than I am,
Yeah.
so, like, it's gonna mess you up more than it messed me up, and I don't want that to happen.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, it's just there. There's no way to really prepare for any of it, and like you were saying earlier, even the survivor's guilt, that people have, people who didn't have to go to war itself, but their whole units went, and then units didn't come home.
Mhm.
So you deal with that. You deal with that survivor's guilt. You're like, well, I'm glad I didn't go, and I'm glad I got to live my life, but at the same time, how fair of that was that to the rest of them that never made it home? Even for me, I'm barely filing for my disability because I went years and years of
Mhm.
seeing horrific trauma
Yeah.
and PTSD, and friends suffer way more than me. And then I was like, I can't just, I
Like,
can't do
those
it. I can't.
resources are for them, I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so and then, it took all of them to tell me for years and years and years, like, hello, these resources are for you too.
Mhm.
Like, stop, stop. Just go do." But it's difficult because you're like, I'm not suffering as bad as somebody else. But then there's other people who aren't suffering as much as me. And I had to learn those things. But a lot of people don't learn that. A lot of
Mhm.
people don't learn those lessons or get taught that through any form of therapies. I've had to do several different types of
Sure.
therapies to help me with my PTSD.
Mhm.
So, it's difficult to do those things. Um and sometimes you're willing to give up. You're like, I've tried this and I've tried
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
and I don't know what else to try anymore. Um so it's a constant fight, it's a constant battle that I think most people just don't recognize or can ever prepare for. But it is something that we could recognize for future generations and be like, hey, this is it. This isn't what you want to go through. This isn't something you need to experience. Those of us who experience this, great, we can tell you what it is, but you don't need to learn the lessons the hard way. Don't be so stubborn in thinking that you have to go through the experience because it's not necessary.
Well, and I think what's important to, and this is another aspect of this conversation that I really want to draw attention to, the people that make all of that money and that they really like, they do not see the value in human life. And like, I won't point to anybody in particular, right? But we have a very elite group of people in this country that have a lot of money and they are profiting like bandits off of every single war. But how, like, as a normal person, right? How do you justify it? How do you not get angry? Like, and that is something I want to like draw attention to, right? It's like those people that are encouraging you to sign up, that are happy to sign on the dotted line because they're going to make, I don't know, $20 million off of oil, or they're going to make $50 million off of it, munitions, or,
Hmm.
$75 million off of new ship builds or whatever. Like, get the fuck out of here. Like,
Yeah.
you're willing to let these kids get blown up for profit, and that's bullshit.
And most of them either A, defected themselves or found a way to get out of it, or B, won't let their kids sign up and join,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know. So I, at that point though, if you're putting once you put profit over human beings, over life itself, I don't really know if there's any way back from that
No,
with
there's
these
not.
people,
There's not.
you
And
know.
and that's kinda, I guess, why I'm, like, drawing it back to the politics of it, right? Is, like, for those people right now that would be like, I don't wanna talk about politics." It's like, I get it. I get it. Honestly, I don't think any of us really, that are doing some of the things that we're doing, whether it's politics, advocacy, whatever. I don't think any of us woke up and were like, "Hey, this'll be fun." Like,
Yeah.
this is what I wanna do with the next 10, 20 years of my life. No, it's because
Wow.
freaking necessary. Because, like, those of us that have the balls to blow the horn, if you will, it's like, "Wake up, people." We just wanna, like, shake people to death because 'cause we're like, "Hey, this is bad. All of this stuff is bad, and if you wanna direct your anger at someone, you need to start aiming your anger at, like, the 1% because these are the people that won't send their sons and daughter, that are gonna profit from your pain, that are, gonna make sure that your relatives that come back from whatever war, doesn't have to be
Mhm.
this one, any of them, they're gonna make sure that those people don't have the resources that they need, and, like, these
Mhm.
people, they don't have humanity, they don't have religion, like, I would just like more people to start highlighting that and having those conversations. It's like, you can fight all day, and, we don't all get along, right? But at the end of the day, you're more alike than you are different. Like, you have more in common with an Iraqi and someone from Afghanistan or
Mhm.
Iran right now, just a regular civilian, right? We're all doing the same thing, but you have these super elite people from, pick a country, doesn't matter, that they're all profiting off of our pain when 9 times out of 10, all of us throughout the world that are citizens would probably get along if it weren't for them.
Yep. Yep, and I think most people actually would. I mean, it goes to our more inherent ways as human beings.
Right.
Um, everything. The reason why we fight so much is because it's manufactured to be
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah.
They even if we're looking at today's political landscape and what you see with everyday people arguing on social media, right? It's manufactured
Yep.
to create that discourse. Um, you know, you even see it in the constant switching of, you know, what's happening. You're going from like the Epstein files,
Yep.
everybody talking about that and everybody
Yeah. Yeah.
focusing
Yeah.
on it. And then now we're switching to, ICE. And
Yep.
now everybody's focusing on that and talking about that. And then now we're switching and focusing on war.
Mhm.
And then in a couple of months, we're gonna be switched and focused back on ICE or
Mhm.
switch and focus back on the Epstein files. And it's a constant switching of traumatic events over and over. It doesn't
Yeah.
get you enough time to really process what's happening, but it gives you enough time to get angry and get emotional
Mhm.
and argue
Mhm.
and fight and get exhausted. And then as soon as that starts to deplete,
Mhm.
now move to the next trauma that they're
Right.
going to highlight and put in your face and do all of those things to kind of keep that cycle going, right? So it's all psychological.
Yeah.
It's all manufactured psychological warfare that
Mhm.
they're doing. And even, I mean, most veterans will tell you psychological warfare is the vast majority of warfare.
Yeah.
And that's what it comes down to. Like even the propaganda that's
Mhm.
used,
Mhm. Mhm.
when we see like, oh, we'll see Venezuelans in the street, cheering on, or
Yeah. Yeah.
Iranians in the street cheering it on, just like
Right.
you saw the Iraqis in the
Yeah,
street
yeah, yeah, sure.
cheering it on. But guess what? That Iraqi, when they pulled down Saddam's statue,
Yep.
that was manufactured. There wasn't thousands of people in the street doing that. It was
Yep.
maybe 100 or so people that and it was already manufactured and was already cleared out. The square was cleared out.
Mhm.
The
Mhm.
military propaganda and the reporters that were there were set up just
Mhm.
to do those shots.
Mhm. Mhm.
And what was spread around the world? The Iraqi people are happy they're liberated. But that's
Mhm.
not what it was. Boots on the ground. Boots on the ground. They were pissed.
Well, I think anybody, right? Like for those right now talking about Iran, right? Oh, they're so excited because they're liberated. No one is ever excited about war. How excited would you be if I always use Indiana for an example because that's where I'm from, right? And I find this to be very effective with people. I'm like, imagine if Illinois decides, you know what? We're going to take the whole western side of Indiana. We're just going to take it. I used to use that a lot with Ukraine and Russia. I'm like, just imagine if, Illinois decides to roll like 1,000 tanks to the side of Indiana and they're like, right, we're just going to start shooting the shit out of you guys. What would happen here? How can you expect anything different from these other countries? Like, how can you expect anything different from Iran? Like, they didn't fire on us first. We're not
Mhm.
operating under the rules of engagement. We're, supporting people that are actively doing a genocide. I mean, it's just amazing. I do have a little bit of hope for the American people though, because I do think like some of this stuff is starting to break ground. People are very, very unhappy. But, anyway, this is just my little part in trying to help educate and inform people. And I'm just like so happy that you're willing to come on and talk a little bit about this because Jesus, we need more vets to get out there and really start pumping their fists because I mean, and I agree with what you said before. I'm never quite sure what to say to vets too, and that's why I generally say honor
Mhm.
because it is an honor for me because I've been in the company of people that have had to do those things, and I know that it changes you.
Mhm.
So, I want to at least show that I have respect for that.
Yeah. And it's not always the easiest thing because I mean, you get people who are like, "You guys are the colonizers," and I'm like,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, true to some degree, yes,
Yep.
but we're fed the same propaganda that everybody else is fed,
Right.
and this is a reason why the average age I think in the military is like, or the average recruiting age is like 20, I
Mhm,
think it is,
mhm, mhm.
and then your average recruits in general, it's like between the ages of 18 and 24, I believe it is.
Mhm.
So even then, I mean, they know what they're doing. They
Yeah.
understand what they're doing. You're dealing with kids with, I mean, we scientifically know this. Our brains are not fully developed until 25, especially our decision making, our frontal lobe area. That's the
Mhm,
last to fully develop,
mhm.
and we're making life and death decisions when and at 18, 19 years old, you're like, you don't ever I mean, I did it. I was like, you ain't afraid to go to war.
Mm.
Last war we were in with like 3 months.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
did it.
yeah.
I thought I was invincible. You're 18. You're not thinking about going to war and never coming home.
Mhm, mhm,
That's not what's at the forefront of your mind. The forefront of my mind was like, hey, I'm gonna get money for college because I come from a low middle class family. My mom's
mhm,
a school teacher. My dad's a factory worker. They've
mhm,
got
mhm.
two other kids. They
Right.
can't afford college. I don't even know what I wanna do, so I don't even wanna go to college right now because I don't wanna waste my money or get into debt for college that I don't even know what I want to do,
Right. Right.
because and this is part of the process. We want, like, I had my kid take a whole gap year. I was
Mhm.
like, "Figure out what
That's
you
awesome.
want to do,"
That's what they
like,
do
I
in
don't
Europe.
yeah, like, you don't have to go straight to college right away,
Mhm.
and you know, you don't have to go into the military. Like, just take some time. Take a break. You've been in school for 13 years. Take
Right.
a break,
Right.
and just kind of enjoy life before you have to adult in this system.
Yeah.
And so, that's what he did. And he's in a community college learning machinery. So it's what he was wanting to do when he was if he would have joined the military.
Mhm.
And he's not going in crazy debt because he's not having to go to a traditional 4-year school to keep up a status, you
Mhm.
know,
Mhm.
and show how smart he is
Right.
because, like, the boy could go into MIT if he
Sure.
wanted to. He's like, "No, that doesn't make sense. Why spend, you know, 10,000 a year when I can spend just as much for 2 years of community college and make 160 grand a year and
Mhm.
get an engineering degree where I'm gonna make less than the actual machinists who actually run the machines and do the coding? The engineers just kind of supervise,
Yeah.
and it's a title, you know? So it's like things like that where we have to reframe how our kids, what we're teaching our kids and what's important. But like at 18, I mean, it's a big recruiting tool to
Mhm.
where you're like, hey, I came from a small town outside of Denver. It was a small farming town. We had one high school, you
Mhm.
know.
Mhm.
So again, low middle class family. What else was I going to do with my life?
Mhm.
I didn't know what else to do and nothing else to do.
Mhm.
It was either work at the local Walmart
Mhm.
or go to college and get myself in debt for something I didn't know what I wanted to be yet, or
Mhm.
go to the military. Those were my options.
Yeah, I think that's basically what the options were here too. Is like hope that
Uh-huh.
you're like at the head of your class and you're going to get some scholarships or something like that, or join the military, and those are the only ways you're getting out of here.
Yep.
And that's what
Yep.
most people did. Well, hey, I very much appreciate you taking the time to come on and talk to us today. Um, if if there are any resources that you want to share with people, vet or not, of how to educate themselves on war, or if they are vets, things that you find helpful, resources that you have that you'd like to share with anybody, just feel free to rattle off whatever you got, or you can send
Uh,
it to me later.
Yeah, I don't have any on the top of my head. I think I mean, it's state by state as well. There's different veteran groups out there. I would say find your local veterans group, your local VFW. Those places, they will definitely have resources. VSOs have resources as well. And then there's actually veterans groups that have started businesses
Hmm.
where they have created nonprofits or their own businesses to help veterans get their disability ratings up where they needed to be, or even, just helping out, at your local shelters, things like that. You'll find people that are willing to have conversations with you if you're willing to listen and not be judgmental. So people are willing to have the conversations a lot of the times, and even if they're not, that's great too.
Hmm. Hmm.
But there's several resources out there. They're not hard to find. I can't, like I said, I usually, if I'm looking for something, I'll go to the local VSO or
Hmm.
to the VFW and ask them or call them up and say, "Hey, do you guys got any resources for this, that, or the third?" And they'll be like, "Yeah, here you go," and send me what's local to the area. So
Hmm.
those are always good starting points if you don't know where to start. So
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, I'm going to ask you again. I know you've been on before, but maybe you have something different this time. For all the things we talked about today, if there's one thing that you want people to remember about you, what is it for this episode?
um my thing would be is don't be too harsh on combat vets. Um a lot of people, it is that duality
Mhm.
that we have to live with. um if those are people like myself who are like, we understand, we were woken up to what we were really in,
Mhm. Mhm.
because of combat. um Take that for what it is. It doesn't mean that we're out here trying to continue to colonize and kill people and do all those things. Most people feel guilty enough as it is.
Mhm.
So just give a little grace, I guess, to those that have been in combat.
Mhm, mhm.
And that's, I think, the most any of us could ask for is just a little bit of grace.
Right,
We're not the vast majority of us aren't the baby killers that we get told we are a lot of
right.
the times, and so to kind of give that grace to the veterans, it's helpful in a lot of ways, more
I
than people know.
I agree with you. Well, hey, Melinda, thank you so much for coming on today. We really appreciate it, and hopefully you'll come back again.
Of course, I'm glad to come anytime. I appreciate it, and I love our conversations.
Yeah, me
Thank you for
too.
having me.
All right. Well, we'll see you guys later.
All right, bye.
Bye. We are at a pivotal point in American history. We do not have the luxury to remain silent. Programs are disappearing every day. We hope that this podcast raises awareness and sparks a sense of advocacy in you. We all can make a difference. The important thing is to start. See you next time.